Disclaimer. Judge Ron Rangel is providing this podcast and website for educational purposes only, as well as to give the public general information regarding topics related to the criminal justice system. The views, thoughts, and opinions of his guest speakers are the speaker's own and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of Judge Rangel. All rise. You are now listening to Beyond the Gavel with Judge Ron Rangel, educating the public and expanding mindsets. Subscribe on our website, beyondthegavelpodcast.com, or your favorite podcast platform for more of the latest podcast episodes and updates.
Welcome to Beyond the Gavel with Judge Ron Rangel. I'm your host. Today in the studio we have
Azalea Balderas-Barroso. And I'm a
nice
case manager with the mental health court.
All right. Well, you say it a lot better than I could have said it. I want you to tell the listeners specifically what you do. You mentioned that you're a case manager with the mental health court. What does that mean?
So what that means is we get referrals from the community, from the different courts, for anyone who may have an indicator of mental health. It may be somebody who's never been diagnosed with a mental health, but may have indicators of maybe having depression or anxiety symptoms, or have a mood disorder. And so we will get a referral. We will screen them. We will try and get them connected to services for an evaluation to verify if they have a diagnosis. And then we will explain what a specialty court program is to them, specifically the mental health court program.
That sounds like a lot of work.
It can be, yes. And really, it's getting the client to buy in, promoting the program, and getting them to buy into the long-term change, the commitment for a year long, and the benefits and how they can have a team support them so that they can be successful after the year that they complete the program.
Very nice. Why don't you tell us about yourself? Where are you from?
I am from here in San Antonio, Texas. I grew up in San Antonio. I went to Providence High School. And then from there, I went on to get my bachelor's in social work from Our Lady of the Lake from the Warden School, and my master's in social work from Our Lady of the Lake as well, from the Warden School Social Service.
So for a long time, Our Lady of the Lake was the place for people who wanted to be social workers to go to school.
Yes, that is correct.
Yeah, at some point after I graduated from college, I thought about becoming a social worker. So I looked into where I could study that program, and it's a Master of Social Work. And I think Our Lady of the Lake was really the only place in the area, I'm thinking maybe all of South Texas, that offered the program.
Yes. I believe, only had Texas State when I was going. And UTSA was just starting to develop their master's program as I was completing. And so I graduated in 2003 with my bachelor's and 2004 with my master's. So
nice. So almost a decade.
Almost, yes.
Why social work? What is it about that type of profession that interested you?
I have to say that I didn't always want to do social work. I actually, when going to high school, I wanted to become a funeral director and embalmer and go to school for mortuary science at SAC. But I had really good advisors in high school that said, you have to apply to 3 colleges. And at that time, I thought, how am I going to pay for this? My parents worked hard enough to pay for private school and did a lot of self-sacrifice. And so I didn't want to put the full burden on them. And so I went ahead and applied, like my advisors told me to apply. And I ended up getting a scholarship to Our Lady of the Lake. Well, my mom was like, you cannot go to SAC. You got a scholarship. You've got admitted to Our Lady of the Lake. So now you got to figure out what to do. So I remember looking at all of the different majors and going back and forth to my advisors. And I really think having gone to Providence and done so much community social service work and community service hours led me to wanting to go into social work and wanting to help others. And so I ended up going to school, choosing the social work school at that time.
Now, I've known you for a couple of years now in the court. So you say that you're a mental health court case manager.
Yes.
Right. So you work with the felony level with us, and you also work at the misdemeanor level as well.
Yes, that's correct.
All right. So we spoke a little bit last time with Emil Huggins, who's a probation officer. You know who he is?
I do. He's a great person.
He is, and we had a great conversation. So so he explained to us what specialty courts do from the probation perspective. Tell us what specialty courts do from your perspective as a case manager.
So we really do things. We hold very many various hats as a case manager for the specialty courts, ensuring that our clients have all of the wraparound services that they need. So when we are working with individuals, we're looking to see if they have housing, do they have ID, do they have any type of income or benefits? What are the resources that we need to get our client linked up to? It may be that our client doesn't have an ID and or social security card, and so we'll need to get them connected to those resources so that they can apply for housing or benefits, food stamps, also treatment. It may be that somebody is not connected to mental health treatment and they're showing indicators of mental illness. And so getting them connected to those resources. Substance use also plays in. So if somebody has any substance use indicators, getting them connected to an assessment to determine if there's a need for outpatient or inpatient types of services and treatments.
Right.
And working along with the client to kind of explain if they come into the program, how at each point of the phase of the program, we would be addressing each of these steps.
So when you say wraparound services, that's sort of a term of art. What does that mean to somebody who may be listening who doesn't know much about the type of profession that we're involved in?
Yes, so wraparound services is definitely making sure the needs,
The basic
needs, yes.
So a case manager tells me that you're in charge of something, that you and another lady named Michelle Starr Salazar sort of run the court. I mean, if you ask people in the community who runs this court, generally speaking, they'll say the judge. Right. I would not agree with that from my perspective with this court. I'm not saying that doesn't apply with other specialty courts, but in this court, I really think that you and Ms. Starr Salazar run the court. What do you think of that?
It's interesting that you say that because we recently went to conference and they kind of touched on that topic about how really your team, your case manager,
yes,
your manager are really the ones who run and do the everyday hard work of the program. However, to the participant, it's the judge and in their view. And so we do a lot of the everyday hard work in the program. But with the participants' interaction that they have with you as a judge, the weight is more than what it is with the program or with us as the case managers. But yes, we handle all the day-to-day stuff to make sure that the docket flows well for you, that any incentives and sanctions that we give our participants are ready to go, and really making sure you have the most up-to-date information to make an informed decision of how you're going to interact with the client.
I think the way the justice system works is not just in specialty courts, but in courts overall, people have a tendency to look at the judge as the person who is completely in charge. Now, yes, in court, the judge sets the tone and the judge makes rules for the protocols that happen within that particular courtroom setting, but the court does not bring the cases forward. The judge doesn't prosecute cases. The judge doesn't defend cases. The judge is basically there to make sure that the court is facilitated and acts as a referee. In a specialty court, what's a different way to look at a judge there? What's the role of the judge in that type of a setting, you think?
So the role of the judge is definitely there on a therapeutic role to be able to interact with the client, to be able to guide the client through the program. And you have the team that's guiding you when we're looking at responses to either behaviors or treatment needs. And so you're really there to help encourage and have that relationship there with the participant.
So everybody on that team has to be a good listener.
Yes.
And when it comes down to sort of trying to get the client to understand the necessity or the participant, the necessity of doing certain things, then the judge could have a little more authority because theoretically the judge could say, I can kick you out of the program. I can choose to sanction you in a way that you might not like. But those are the kind of things that the team always discusses before the judge communicates with that participant or the defendant in that case. Is that right?
That is right. Yes.
So how many folks are involved in a team?
So we have our public defender or the defense attorney. We have the ADA for the state, myself as a case manager. We have our contracted treatment providers. Right now we work with Center for Healthcare, Crystal Counseling. And then we also have our substance abuse provider at the table if there's any substance use needs. I think that's pretty much the whole team that we have. And so everybody is there to provide updates on their participant that they're interacting with.
You've been seeing this work now for about a decade.
Yes.
What changes have you seen within the system related to the types of things that you have to do in a specialty court?
Lots of changes. And so the world of specialty courts is constantly evolving. What we did 10 years ago, where we may have recommended a jail sanction, we may not be recommending that now. We're getting updates based on research where we take high risk, high needs clients. And so how we get those assessments and how we know they're high risk, high needs, we're now also learning that we could service maybe a low risk, no needs or moderate risk, high needs, and what type of intensive supervision or case management. We're learning that we're able to do different tracks with them.
What do you attribute those changes to? What's going on in society or within the courts themselves that is making that type of a change?
I think a lot of it is the studies and the data that we're getting. Just recently got a conference and we've gotten the most recent data. And so we're seeing what is working. And so definitely, the incentives, the sanctions, the interactions with the team members, a lot of it too can be the type of treatment and intervention, addressing the criminogenic needs. So things like MRT, which is the moral recognition therapy.
What you run, right?
I do.
Yes.
We have a regular track of MRT, and I actually facilitate the MRT trauma, which is more of a trauma based. And I also have recently the domestic violence, but that definitely addresses the morals, the values, the thinking, and it really gets the participants to be able to work through the workbooks and thinking and process with other participants.
So the moral recognition therapy is sort of a newer facet, a newer tool that we use within the court system, right?
It is. And most specialty courts either use a thinking for change or seeking safety or the MRT, which is a moral recognition therapy. Yes.
So this is a period of high growth in terms of the area of specialty courts and treating individuals that are involved with the criminal justice system. Does that have to do with things like COVID, where maybe we started looking at jail beds differently? Does that have to do with things like studies that relate to the negative impact on society that maybe somebody who doesn't need to be in custody will experience? What are the things that are happening in society now that you see?
I mean, we're definitely seeing that, jail is the long and the length of time for somebody to be in jail who has a mental illness or has substance abuse is not beneficial to that person.
Right.
And so looking at the studies, access to treatment earlier or access to these types of programs earlier is what we're really seeing is benefiting them in the long run.
So when somebody completes this type of a program, it's important to make sure that there's some sort of bridge on their completion of the program to how they can live the rest of their lives. In other words, you can't just say, you've graduated, you've completed a year with us, congratulations, good luck to you.
Right.
There's more to it than that, right?
Yes. There's that whole transition. And so starting normally about 3 months before they end program, we're already looking at transitioning of services. Where are they going to be when they finish the program? Do they know where to go should something happen and they need to access those types of resources? Do they have their benefits lined up? And so we're constantly, planning as we're getting towards the 3, 2, and 1 month mark so that when they complete the program, they have all the tools in their toolbox to be able to pull from once they complete.
So you're talking about resources, which to a lot of people means money.
Right.
How does the funding appear for these kinds of things that individuals involved in the programs need to be successful in the future?
The funding is vital. when it comes to housing. And of course, a lot of our participants may not have a source of income. So if they are not able to work to be able to self-sustain, making sure they have their benefits, Social Security benefits. If they are able to work, then ensuring that they have some type of employment and knowing how to budget. But to be able to access housing resources, that is very, very limited. And accessing other resources within the community we try and get them connected to utility assistance and try and offset some of the costs so that they are able to maintain.
So where does the funding for these types of specialty courts come from? Is it a combination of different resources, different entities?
Our funding is coming fully from Commissioner's Court.
So the county
Funded program.
Does any money come from the state?
No, we don't receive any money from the state. So we're fully county funded programming.
Okay.
Some of the other specialty courts do get grant funds, but we don't.
We don't, meaning the mental health.
Meaning the mental health court program.
Okay. How many participants are currently in the misdemeanor mental health court and in the felony pretrial diversion mental health court?
So right now, I would say we're running about 70 participants between the two courts.
That's a lot.
That is.
Yeah. And those are participants that you manage.
Yes.
Give us a couple of interesting examples, understanding the requirements that we have to give people dignity and their privacy. We don't want to obviously refer to anybody specifically, but what are some of the interesting type cases that you have to deal with as it relates to helping people along the program that folks, generally speaking, wouldn't understand or wouldn't think would be an issue?
So we've had some clients that maybe have come in that maybe be a mom who may have lost children due to a previous Family Protective Service case, who may end up expecting again. And so they're wanting to change for this next child that's coming in hopes that maybe they can keep this child. So definitely getting that person linked to like substance use treatment, inpatient, step down into an Oxford home for that long-term sobriety, employment, with the hopes that they could reunify. And so that's been one of the participants that I know I worked with that was a very long road. I believe did inpatient twice. She was able to have her child be reunified and even get to have visitation with the children that she had previously lost custody of. Not having understanding of how the mental health and how the addiction played together. Somebody would it really on a regular court program may not understand, or somebody looking in from the outside may not understand all the various agencies that play in with Family Protective Services, the substance use providers, the mental health services. And so being able to coordinate and work with all of those different entities together to help that person become successful.
What are some of the most rewarding parts of your job?
Some of the most rewarding parts is when you can see somebody who maybe treatment-wise has not always been on their medication, who has been struggling and you can tell really suffering, not able to maintain day-to-day activities or tasks, and then they start to become compliant with those medications and they're able to just start to think differently. They're able to start processing things differently. And then when they're able to start maintaining a regular routine schedule, and then of course, just being able to see them maintain a day-to-day living, whether it be gaining employment and holding a job. So I think those are, they outweigh all the bad.
Right. See somebody function.
Yes. I know we had one participant who went into residential substance use treatment. A lot of it was substance along with the mental health. The family really didn't think that he was able to accomplish things. Somebody needed to take him, somebody needed to drive him. But after completing that residential and maintaining on medications, he came out, went into an Oxford home, has been able to maintain employment and maintain a budget, and he can get to his UAs on his own. And so there's sort of that independence, and then just to see that confidence in themselves, like, I can do this. And to see those cases, those successes are huge.
What are some of the impediments or the issues that you see kind of work that you do?
One could be fear of disclosing symptoms.
And this is from the participants.
From the participants,
yes.
A lot of times they're afraid to talk about what they've been experiencing because of fear of judgment or fear of what's going to happen. So many times when I'm screening, I get the question, if I tell you this, are you going to send me to the hospital? Am I going to get locked up? And so kind of explaining how treatment, how services work to kind of educate them to kind of set the calmness down so that they're willing to talk and willing to open up regarding the symptoms.
So there's a lot of counseling. There's a lot of therapy involved. They see psychiatrists, generally speaking, if they're going to get medication.
Yes. I would say one of our hardest hurdles is getting the attorney permission form signed.
Mm-hmm.
For attorneys to allow us to meet with their clients, to be able to screen them for the program. And I think it's important to know that for attorneys to know that when we're screening clients for the program, that we are not discussing any of the facts of the case with them. What we're doing is we're screening if there's any need for mental health services or any need for substance. But in order for us to be able to touch or make contact with this client, we need an attorney permission form to be able to speak with them.
What if an attorney has a belief that somehow or another divulging a mental health diagnosis could be detrimental to a case?
Right. So, definitely, we don't ever divulge what's in the screening. Now, if this is something that we are going to move forward with, and as far as a pretrial application, then we let them know, we need to verify diagnosis or there is a actual mental health diagnosis.
So is there some form or document that would indicate to attorneys that any information that you gather would not be used for the prosecution of a criminal case?
It's normally everything's explained on the attorney permission form of the process will be and explained to the attorney.
Oh, I'm enjoying this conversation. Let's take a quick Q&A break. We'll be right back.
This is Q&A with Judge Ron Rangel. Submit your question today at beyondthegavelpodcast.com.
This is Q&A. We have a question. It's an interesting one. What are the rules of the robe? Is it locked in a closet? Are there different types of robes? Do you wash it? What can you tell us? That's a very personal question. So when I first got elected back in 2008, I bought 2 robes. I still wear those robes today. It was important for me to get robes that were very light, that wouldn't make me too hot in the courtroom. So I got lambskin robes. Generally speaking, robes cost about $300 to $400. On occasion, a new judge will come in and they'll ask me about the robes, and there's a certain website that we'll send them to. But the robes are very comfortable. They have to be dry cleaned. I think if I were to wash mine, it probably would not turn out very well. They're black because the robe is supposed to show people that the judge is the individual that is interpreting the law and is making decisions according to the law, and folks that are within that courtroom are supposed to comply with the judge's interpretation. There are different colors of robes that people wear depending on the season. Sometimes judges like to celebrate certain holidays. In general, I like to wear the black robe just because it's an easy thing for me to do. I also teach at UTSA, so during graduation, I've considered breaking out my judicial robe until I realized that people that wear the robes at college graduations have different types of brands on them, or they look a little bit different. That was a fun one to answer. Let's get back to the show.
This is Q&A with Judge Ron Rangel. Submit your question today at beyondthegavelpodcast.com.
So we know, based where we're at in society, that there are more diagnoses of mental health illnesses now than there have been in the past, right? Generally speaking, that's been an issue. But are people suffering more from the effects of mental health now? Or is it just that we notice it now, we diagnose it more now? People do come to me, as in my career, right, in my job, people do come to me and say, there just seems to be more and more and more mental health diagnosis now than there ever have been. What's going on?
I think it's education. I think for so long we've been talking about eliminating stigmas of mental health, and we are educating more. We're talking about mental health. Stuff is happening in society. And so I think mental health is now becoming a topic. And it's not something that we keep as hush hush as we used to. And I think with us starting to talk about it more, becoming more educated about it, it's definitely something that's coming to light. And so I think we're starting to see more mental health and how it's impacted. The same with trauma. Before, we don't talk about these symptoms, we don't talk about what happened. And now we're learning that it's okay to talk about these things.
Is it possible to prevent mental health problems up front before they get to court, before they get a situation where society is now having to pay for these kinds of things?
It is possible. It can be really hard. And some of the things I've heard is I tried to get help, but I didn't have funding or I didn't have insurance. And never did I think coming into the criminal justice system would be a blessing to be able to get that help. And a lot of times people try to get the help on the outside. They just don't have the insurance or the benefits to be able to navigate it.
So for people out there that want an understanding as to how these specialty courts work, what advice would you give to somebody that would want to enter into that type of a career?
Definitely coming in and observing, requesting to come and observe the court.
And you could do that anytime,
You
right?
can, but you're welcome to come in and observe or reach out to the court if this is something you're interested in learning about.
Right. What kind of advice would you give a judge in saying, this is how to handle this type of a court?
Definitely the listening and the observation to look at, how the client is responding. Are they getting fidgety? Are they looking anxious? And what kind of vibe are they putting off? And to be able to really read them. And that can be hard because sometimes some of our clients do want to mask their signs or symptoms because they don't want the court or anyone to know, because there's still that hesitance for trust. And so just really being able to listen and observe the participant and really getting to know them.
Understand the signs.
The signs, yes.
Right. Know how to recognize those things. Where do you see the future of mental health treatment going?
The future of mental health is definitely going to say boom in the next years. I think
more so than what we've recently seen?
Yes, I think so. I think it's a benefit that we're seeing early on our interventions with our youth, interventions in the schools.
Right.
Definitely seeing, partnerships with agencies providing counselings in the schools. A lot of our schools are starting to identify early on. And so I think that early on identification in schools and then providing the family services is going to continue to grow.
I think a lot of long-term studies started beginning in our history around the 70s and 80s. We started looking at where the judicial system was going and what we can do in terms of how to handle crime. Is that kind of the same as it relates to the mental health study or the study of mental health?
Yes.
Yeah. So we're starting to see now the effects of a lot of long-term studies. Do we see mental health diagnosis growing? Is it an environmental kind of situation, or is it something that you kind of see has always just existed, but because of the stigmas and because of the lack of understanding of it, we didn't know how to deal with it?
I would say it's probably the lack of understanding and the stigmas that we just probably didn't understand how to deal, or we didn't know, or it was something that we kind of maybe always just dealt with. And I think access to social media, access to internet, I think all those platforms have really brought a way of communication that maybe we didn't have back then, years ago.
Right. What does the typical mental health court participant look like in terms of like demographics? In other words, in the justice system, folks generally come into the system when they're young, uneducated. They come from certain parts of the community that are disenfranchised in a sense. They don't have family support. They don't have jobs. What does a mental health court participant look like as it relates to statistics?
I think we're seeing a large number within the age range of about 20 to 30.
Young.
And even more so right now, and it's probably a little bit harder, is our 18 to 20-year-old population.
Mm-hmm.
And so definitely dealing with the mental health, definitely dealing with transitional housing, either homeless or family dynamics are not very supportive at home, definitely financial stressors going on in the home, substance use plays into it as well. Normally, that's kind of what our typical client looks like.
Mm-hmm. If I was a genie, think of Barbara Eden and I Dream of Jeannie, one of my favorite shows when I was growing up, and I could grant you 3 wishes on how to best improve the system related to specialty courts, what would you say?
Definitely funding.
That's important.
Funding, yes, funding for treatment. And it's probably going to be at the level of care treatment. So,
What does that mean?
that means level of care is the type of services that are provided. And definitely for a higher level of care, somebody who may need to be seen 2-3 times a week in the home, somebody who may need a medication like an injection form of medication, because those injections are about $1,000 an injection. So definitely funding for that level of service of care.
Funding for medication and human capital
Yes.
to do these kinds of things.
Yes.
To check up on people, make sure that they're working.
Right. Yes. And then treatment beds for dual diagnosis services.
Right. And we do have a lack of that. That's something in the justice system we talk about.
Yes.
We do not have enough beds in what we call the dual diagnosis residential facility locally. And that's really all we have in the justice system for folks that need some sort of treatment that are in the system.
Yes, that's correct. That's definitely a need. And especially we have substance use providers, but to have the dual to address both the mental health and the substance, especially for indigent population.
They probably go hand in hand pretty often.
Yes, most definitely. Because what we'll see is participants who have been coping using substances to try and make themselves feel better from how they're feeling, not realizing that they're trying to cover up their mental health symptoms. And then once we get them clean and sober, then they're dealing with emotions. Also, then they might have developed an addiction and have those cravings and urges to want to use again because they've been trying to self-medicate for so long. So they really do go hand in hand.
Emil was talking about how the expenditure in a specialty court is much more for a defendant than a regular, what we consider to be a regular court expense would be. We have 14 specialty courts in Bexar County on the criminal side. We do have others that are on the civil district court and county court side. Is there any type of specialty court that you think we're missing? There's enough of these, and I'll give you an example. I was approached not too long ago to consider the idea of a homeless court. And I did say I understand the value of that. On the felony court side, I don't know what we could do. To me, that would seem more appropriate for a misdemeanor type court because the kind of charges that those types of individuals get involved with are different than ours. Is there any court like that you would consider to be something that would sort of round out the needs that we have in Bexar County?
So I believe the homeless court is something that's coming up or has started to evolve. And so I really think that's really great for our homeless population for that target.
On the misdemeanor
level. On the misdemeanor level, yes. Yes, because a lot of those are criminal trespass.
Right.
Where we have 12, 15 criminal trespass warnings that are repetitive. They're the low misdemeanor level.
Right. Our last episode included a mental health participant. And you know who I'm talking about.
Yes, I do.
Vanessa Sandoval. And when I see her, I feel very proud. Not necessarily of myself, but for her. I feel proud for her because I see what she's accomplished. What types of situations have you seen folks come from when they start the program and then when they walk out those doors? Like, what type of success stories have you seen? Because I know that you've talked a little bit about the positive experiences, but what can we do to sell the concept of mental health specialty courts to the general public?
Vanessa Sandoval was a great example of a participant. I mean, she came into the program and she really took and embraced treatment. She was one of my MRT participants as well, and she really worked curriculum. She really did well, and she is one that she wants to go back for her doctorate degree. So to be able to see her and the growth that she had in that year to where she is today is definitely a selling point for these programs. We have another individual as well who, when I screened him, I was very concerned that I would not be able to speak to him again. And so much so that housing was a huge concern for him. And I said, you know what? Let's not even worry about the screen. Let's get you connected to your housing. If that means that you and I make a deal that you'll come back and see me and we can talk about this program again.
Right.
And he wasn't, of course, not meeting any needs to where he needed to go to the hospital, but still was of a concern. And so we got him into housing. He worked the program. When he graduated, he got a job at Toyota and he took the bus everywhere. And he was expecting his first baby and going from a shelter and hotel rooms to hopefully soon transitioning to save money to be able to rent his own apartment.
Very nice.
So when you see participants and their testimony like that, those are selling points itself on the program.
I can imagine it's a very emotional, mental type job. I'm sure it draws a lot of energy out of you at the end of the day, right?
Yes.
What do you do to relax?
I go home. Normally on my drive home, I try not to talk to anybody on the phone.
That's smart.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I try, well, of course, I'm a mom. So I go home and I begin my second job of being a mom and just enjoying those moments. And that's probably my biggest stress relief. And that can be stressful in itself, but just that's probably my big stress reliever. Being able to have those family moments with my family and my kids, that's everything.
When I was going through some very stressful times in my life, my children were very young, and I found myself in need of some sort of comfort. There's something about just talking to a very young child, hugging them. Those kind of things are very therapeutic.
Yes.
Because they're so innocent, right?
Right. Yes.
And for them, the world is just you.
Right.
Tell me something interesting about Azalea.
Something interesting. Okay, well, I will tell you that I used to do folklorico and flamenco.
Really?
Growing up in high school, and I used to dance on the Riverwalk at the Arneson River Theater.
With the big dress.
With the big dress and the castanets.
And
so I did that all through high school growing up. And as I went on to college, I kind of stopped. But another interesting fact is I used to teach Zumba. But it kind of went hand in hand with my mental health. I had a lot of great participants that I would teach Zumba to, and they would come and they would confide and just talk with me. And sometimes not even realizing how it was impacting or helping them confidence-wise or emotionally. So those are two interesting facts that nobody knows.
I have a confession to make. When I was 11, 12, somewhere in there, my mom got myself and my younger brother involved in folklorico. He took to it. He was great at it. He got to wear the uniform and got to do the dance. I always looked at it like, oh, that's just not cool. I don't want. And looking back, I've regretted it ever since because he has been very cool. That is a good thing to get, especially younger folks involved in. Kind of give them the confidence to express themselves and to appreciate parts of the culture, right?
Yes.
Well, Azalea, I've enjoyed talking to you today.
I've enjoyed talking to you, as always.
And I know you stayed late. It's kind of late.
I did, yes.
Yeah, it's past 7.
But that's normal for me.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Sometimes I'm walking out late and I do see that you work very, very hard. Is there any last words that you would like to provide for anybody who's listening?
If you ever want to know about a specialty court, definitely feel free to reach out and just know that these programs really do work to implement change. We're working to change behavior that's been done for many years. And so a year probably isn't enough to implement, but it's definitely a good start.
Well, I think you do a great job in the court. I feel very fortunate to work with you. And I think if folks out in society knew the great work that you and the other members of the mental health court team do, they would be very happy with the expenditure that goes into that. You have reached the end of this episode. I've had a great time. Thanks so much for listening. We'll be back in 2 weeks.
You've been listening to Beyond the Gavel with Judge Ron Rangel. Join us in the next 2 weeks where we are educating the public and expanding mindsets. Head to our website, beyondthegavelpodcast.com, or your favorite podcast platform to subscribe to the latest episodes and updates.